Life.
It is time for another cake layer. Hello and welcome. If you are new here, I have an ongoing challenge where I have a giant cake frog, and for every subscriber milestone I hit, I am adding another cake tier to that cake. Here is the current cake. And we have just hit 300,000 subscribers, which, first of all, thank you so much. Oh my god, you people like frogs, which I appreciate. So we need to add another cake layer. We'll be adding the orange layer today. We're just gonna jump into it. The first thing we need to do, as you know, is a sketch. And this time I actually have a time lapse for you. This layer was a little bit of a challenge because I didn't have a clear idea of what I wanted when I went in, which is why you see me experimenting with a few different ideas. I knew that this was going to be an angry layer because that's what the previous orange layer was. First, I just had him just kind of reaching out like he was coming to get you. However, people had mentioned that they kind of wanted one of my cake layers to look like it was getting squished. So I decided ultimately to make this one angry that he's being squished, with his arms and legs reached out like they're trying to get away or get you. I also ultimately decided to make this orange theme. I did debate doing carrots at first because that kind of seemed like it'd be a really cute idea, but oranges had my heart. I also decided that since this one was going to be so big, I didn't want the frosting base to be just one flat color. I wanted to make it this ombre style. I'm not sure what the actual term is called, but it's kind of like where you blend a few colors together and it kind of still retains a little bit of that streakiness. I also knew that I wanted it to have a bunch of fun multicolored sprinkles. Okay, let me know if it's entertaining or distracting to have my little talking head in here. The one thing I will say as far as advice getting started is, this is a kind of a joke, but I always say that I start by just inserting a sphere and mashing it around. That is true. The one thing that I leave out though is that usually I'll insert a sphere, really any shape, mash it around to be like a general, just kind of the basic shape that I'm looking for, and then I will Z-remesh it. I don't know if retopologizing is the equivalent word. I'm using Zbrush terms here, and even then I don't know if I'm using the right terms. But I Z-remesh it so that it can be much lower poly, as low poly as it can go without getting too messed up, and then I'll start refining the shape. I would say to always do your large form changes when it's in its lowest poly state, because that's going to avoid lumpiness. It's really easy to get just so lumpy if you are trying to move it around when it's a really high poly when it's really high poly. If you are paying attention, you'll see that anytime I will insert a sphere, get it to the general shape, Z-remesh it to be lower poly, and then I will fine tune the shape. And then I will subdivide it more and get the finer details after the overall shape is what I want. Now, sculpting this guy was actually, I'd say, a lot easier than the previous layer. I think the piping work is kind of a pain in the butt and can take a lot of time to finesse and get right. For this one, overall, everything went pretty smoothly. The arms, I think I learned a lot from the previous layer, the struggle that I had with the arms before. I learned, and so the arms went quite smoothly. I was very happy. But the legs are what gave me troubles on this one. Oh boy, it was such a struggle. The difficult thing is all of my kicks are kind of, they're stylized frogs, right? They don't look like a frog exactly. They've been stylized. And so the legs, it's so hard to get them to look like not man legs to make them look like frog legs. But again, not exactly like, if I sculpt them to look exactly like a frog leg, they're gonna look weird. But when I stylized it, it just looked like another freaking arm or a weird human foot. I even got my husband in, I was like, can you help me? He tried an attempt and it still looked wrong, so I redid it. The final attempt, I think, actually works, or at least as close as it's going to get. But yeah, it was a real struggle. Otherwise, everything else went pretty smoothly. Yes, the double butt. I wasn't certain that I wanted to do a double butt initially. It was one of those things where it was hard. It's hard to know during the sketching concept phase how much space I'm gonna have in the trunk, you know, how much space in the trunk we're gonna have. And once I finally got sculpting and inserted the legs and everything, I found out that we had such a large canvas to work with that we just had a second butt. Enjoy 2 butts. And I apologize. You're about to watch the worst way to make a star in Zbrush. I know there are better ways. Those are more of 3D modeling. I am not a 3D modeler. I am a 3D sculptor. I do not know how to 3D model dealing with edges and vertices and all that. So I apologize. This is probably really painful to watch, but hey, it worked. Look, it's a star. It looks good enough. It looks good enough to be a star sprinkle. One part that I was concerned about was the icing texture. Because I'm trying to go for this ombre, like blended frosting look for the base of the cake, it's really going to only work if I can get the frosting texture down, which is hard. Any of those textures that are textures similar to like ice cream or like a mashed potato or anything like that, it's a soft food. You don't think about how much texture it has, but when you look at it, it's so much texture. Trying to make something that's going to be hard plastic up here soft, that's really hard. I think I did a decent job. Of course, paint's going to add life to it. Right now, it looks a little weird as a 3D model, but I think it kind of works. Also, one of my Patreon supporters suggested that I try making him look like he was busting a little bit. They gave me some nice reference of how cakes actually bust at the seams, and I did try to go for that. However, by the time I added all of the orange slices and decorations and whatnot, it really covered it up, so I'm sorry, I tried! Printing this beast actually went surprisingly well. Similar to the previous layer, I divided it up into 4 chunks only to realize that it was ever so slightly too big for the printing. I decided that we should take the arms and legs off and just have them socket in later, which wasn't too difficult to do, but oh my goodness, did it break my brain a bit. Just keeping track of all of the various layers in Zbrush was hard. Next, we need to check the sliced file for any voids, and you'll notice here that I did include an infill this time just to prevent warping, which worked out great. I had little to no warping on these, which made assembly so much easier. I didn't do an infill in the past because I was worried that it would make it harder to cure on the inside, so I went with a very minimal one this time and it seemed to be fine. But we had no print failures, everything printed just a dandy. As for how I cure the inside of these, I usually add a bunch, and I mean a bunch, of drain holes. That way, when it comes to curing, I can just set it under my lamp, and like every 10 minutes I'll come in and move the curing lamp to a different hole, and that seems to be enough to get full coverage on the inside. Hello. Look, it's a ghost. Alright, we gotta move fast because it's gonna be 103 today. And it's getting hotter by the hour. We're going to do a dry fit. I think the cake pieces have been thoroughly cured. So now I'm going to go through and clean up. I need to clean up, chop these supports off. Pull it easy. Okay, now we need to chop down some dowels. There you go. Da-da-da. They're gonna go in there, but they're currently way too long. So, well, actually, I'm gonna saw it. Dry fit. Dry fit. The dry fit is complete. Oh yeah, if you're wondering what happened here, this was actually an error in the model that I did not catch until after it printed. You can actually see it on the slice file. If you focus your attention to the top right corner, you can see a very, very thin layer of resin. Now luckily this won't cause any structural or safety issues, it's just going to make it very annoying to clean up. So I'm going to sand these edges where the epoxy is going to go, just to give it a rough surface to stick to. And then I'm going to glue them all together. And then we can see if the little chicken legs fit. But I am going to keep them separate for now because it'll be way easier to sand them when they're separate like this. It is already so warm. I am so sweaty and I haven't even done all that much. I epoxied the cake pieces together and sanded the little legs. And I do need to bondo the seams of the cake a little bit later after the epoxy has time to set up. And it's only going to be even hotter. Yeah, everything is difficult. I went to do a dry fit only to realize that my peg solution was not a solution. Every time I tried to fit a freaking leg into a leg hole, the little pegs broke and they would break into the hole, so I couldn't get them out. And so we decided that we're just gonna break off the pegs. We don't need pegs. Nobody needs them. So, as you can see, I went through and broke off all the little pegs and proceeded to do another dry fit, which went well, except I didn't realize until I already started gluing that I did the dry fit with all the little legs upside down. As you can see, look at them upside down. But yeah, I didn't realize that until after I had already started gluing them, and so in a panic I had to flip them all around, and of course once they were right side up they were no longer in the correct pegs. So it's okay. We got them all in. I think they're in the right spots. It's not going to matter, but oh my god. In very exciting news, my husband finally got approval to work on my channel. Huzzah! So I can show you the footage of him helping me to bondo and sand this big boy together, which was super helpful. I was working on my latest drop and I really wanted to get the cake out, but I had too much that I needed to do, so he very kindly took on the task of bondoing the seams and sanding them together. I'm sorry I did not get any footage of this, however he went in with the Dremel afterwards to get an extra smooth finish. And here it was when he was done with it. The seams are pretty much blended, however there are bits on the arms and stuff that I need to go in and sand now. At this stage I'm also putting milliput into all of the drainage holes in the arms. And that'll take 4 hours to set up, and then I will go in and sand it again. It's endless patching and sanding, patching and sanding. We then covered it with the gray primer just to give a uniform surface so we could see what all needed to be sanded. And then I sprayed it with a white primer because that's going to be better to paint on top of. We also had a little bit of a forest fire scare around this time. I mean, that's California for you. It was actually looking like we might have to evacuate. However, luckily, at least for us, the fire's path changed and we didn't have to go anywhere. Though, of course, Libby was wholly unbothered. Look at this. Not a care in the world. It's time to paint. I used Duncan Rhodes, their Tooth and Coats line a lot for this one. I really like their oranges a lot. As much as I love Army Painter, this is no slander against Army Painter, I've been pretty disappointed with a lot of their oranges. They've been just so sheer. And I know that yellows and oranges are hard in general because they tend to be sheer, but some of the Army Painter oranges I've tried have just been straight up jelly colors. Anywho, trying to get the brushy icing style gradient going in here. This was a lot of fun. It was nice because it was pretty low pressure because it didn't have to be perfectly blended. In fact, it looks better if you could see some of the brush strokes. I just started by putting a mid-tone orange down all over the entire base and then brushed on the lighter tone on top and the darker orange on the bottom. And these orange slices were a lot of fun. They were really satisfying to finish. However, they got very old very quickly because I didn't realize just how many I put on this cake. There were so many and they took so long. But I did really love adding all the little highlights. I think it really brought them to life. I'm sorry I don't really have a lot of footage of me painting the sprinkles because I had to hold this cake at some very strange angles in order to get full coverage. And at this size, the eyeballs are full-on black voids. My husband did mention a technique in order to make them more dimensional, like casting them and making like actual acrylic eyeballs. Maybe I'll have to do that in the future. We're just going to finish off the top icing, clean up all of our messy work, and it is done. And the cake is done. It's time to put it all together. I'm gonna go try to carry the cake over here, so wish me luck. Cake, cake. Okay, cake, let's behave. It's really just the top 2 layers. Oop. We are officially getting a little heavy. This bottom layer on its own was quite heavy. Thank you so much for 300,000 subscribers so that this can exist. Oh no. I'm never doing candles again. I know, you're all gonna yell at me. It's easier said than done to just attach them. Also, I like being able to stack them. Thanks so much for watching. Bye! Don't mind me. Oh god, it's falling again. That pink layer is trouble.